my friends, we have been asked, at least by our own bishop in this Lent, to lead the people in the thought of the soon-to-be canonized John Paul II on one specific issue, the Blessed Sacrament. And for that he proposed to us to share his thoughts, which come from the encyclical on the Eucharist, which he published in the year of the Eucharist. And for that to happen, we need perhaps to jump already to the beginning, which is this day. Through divine providence, I was standing at the spot where this happened only a few months ago, and I looked carefully, and close to the steps, still there, which the damsel of which the first reading was speaking would have climbed, the little house there where she lived, the simple Miriam, our Blessed Lady, getting water and so on, she would have been there, and she would have been in quiet mode of receptivity when she was suddenly visited. And the whole of creation, as we have in the meditation of St. Bernard of Clairvaux, was waiting for a syllable. He has this very poignant paragraph. The angels are waiting, human beings are waiting, creation is waiting, all is waiting for an answer. And when that answer came, the answer which we repeat, not once, but twice, that is, we repeat 3 times a day. We take it in the morning when the sun is rising, at midday, when actually quite a few bells still ring out, and in the evening, when actually still on the radio and television it is rung out. The Angelus is still there, and so it is in all Catholic lands. And we repeat that word, fiat. And that was the word that made it happen. Before she said that, she said another phrase, which personally to me is very dear, and I still sing it at the end of midday office actually, because it's monastic tradition to have an antiphon to Our Lady at the end of every office. So that's the one I take at that point. Behold the handmaid of the Lord, which is what was sung when I took the habit on this day actually in 1977 and lost my hair and took another name, because that was a saying yes and also a saying behold, the very word which we have in the psalm in the form of I am. Behold, I am here to do your will. And that is the issue. Any soul wanting to serve the Lord comes to that point of zero, I hand over. And then the will abandoned, we abdicate over time and authority, and we are in order. He's able to get through once the will says fiat. He can't until that point is reached. Until that's happening, in human terms, we're kidding ourselves. And that happens. It can happen even in a glorious way. Everything but the essential. And the proof, by the way, is there in our reactions to things. E.g., when things don't go according to our still present will, we start to make noises, reactions, effervescence, refusal of what's going on, bad words, bad temper. It shouldn't be like that. Well, that's the litmus test. We're still in authority. We're still not accepting, because the will of God also comes through events. And we have to accept and wed the will of God, and it comes in its providential form of history. History, after all, is His story. There are certain things we can't fight. So in that sense, to have freedom, one has to let go. Otherwise we're creating unnecessary suffering. So what I'm getting at is this. That word there is the very word that this night we must give. And when it happened, another thing happened which we have in the third part of the Angelus. And in Ireland we still do it actually. We kneel. That comes from the Old Mass, where the last Gospel et verbum caro factum est. And by the way, as on Christmas Day, so at this Mass of the Creed, that still is there. Not the inclination of the head, the bow of the head, but actually genuflection is still there in the new rite at that point and became man. The Church kept it, reminding us on this day, as on Christmas Day, the centrality of the Creed. Remember, that was thrashed out council after council until we got to a formula which says it all, condenses the whole of a very difficult doctrine in understandable terms. God from God, light from light. It's very beautiful, actually, and very ancient. So, at that point, it happened. Et verbum caro factum est. And the Word became flesh. And in Nazareth, there, it's actually the first Mass we celebrated in the Holy Land. We just got permission to celebrate at a free altar there. A little quiet group we were, just 5 of us from Ireland. And then we prayed around, and near the altar was this point where it happened. Once Our Lady had said fiat, the Word actually zoomed into our time, took flesh, and that flesh, of course, had to be obtained from a human being, prepared by the Immaculate Conception and made ready. And so we have at that point, inscribed in the point where it happened, in the ground itself, not just the words verbum caro factum est, but the word added, hic, here. This is the point where it happened. Wow, it makes the goose peoples come, but one realizes this is the point where actually time and eternity intersected and where the redemption happened. Therefore, it's quite fitting that this should happen fairly close to Holy Week, because that flesh was being received so that with it redemption could happen. That's always the backdrop to Bethlehem, therefore. The cross is in the background. He couldn't suffer without having the instrument with which to redeem us. And he was to undertake, in a sense, our hell, condensed into Calvary. And it's possibly that which is also the backdrop to that mysterious word which at the end of the agony of 3 hours on the cross, he said, when he used that phrase from the psalm, "Why have you abandoned me?" What was going on there? And theologians and mystics would seem to suggest that what was happening there was that he was voluntarily saying, I want to take it all, including a momentary experience of not having the beatific vision, because in virtue of the union, called the hypostatic union, he was always in that state of interior ecstasy and vision. And it seemed that at that point, we don't know, but it's possible that he wanted to take on the curse, therefore the separation, as it were, for one fraction in time, and in that the whole was assumed. What happened then is quite mysterious. We don't quite understand what it means in the Creed, actually the Apostles' Creed, which is very ancient, remember. He descended into hell. In Latin it's ad inferos, and the root of inferos is underneath, isn't it, down? Well, it would certainly be a going out of the body, because all death includes that, therefore the soul was on its way. And if you've seen Mel Gibson's film, it would seem to suggest, because he has the 2 deaths happening very close, one to the other. The Bad Thief was a rough ride. It's quite horrible, actually, in that film, because he suggests, in the way that these Hollywood filmmakers could do, and pretty well, actually, that this refusal of the fiat on the part of the bad thief, he was suffering but uselessly, he was just rejecting and cursing, whereas the other one, with one simple word, again, remember me when you come into your... That redeemed him and gave him a plenary indulgence. Today, you'll be with me. Interesting. The travel, I think of that verse, when I think of the travelling people, the rejects who have got nothing but recognise it. They get there first. So he was the first. The other one, of course, in that same pain, refusing and suffering in vain. And Mel Gibson has that scene where his soul comes out of his body and doesn't go up at all, goes down. And in his presentation of it, you can see the bowels of the earth opening, and old Nick down there waiting for him with great glee. Awful. But it may be closer to reality than we think. Anyway, when it comes to the Lord's death, then with that same power which he has as a great filmmaker, one can see that breaking out of awful pain, if you like, the hell assumed, and then it starts to happen. And we're not quite sure what happened. If you come across the readings that we have of the Passion in Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, that's quite interesting, because she has intuitions that he did actually go down for a moment, even to the lowest level, because he was claiming, in a sense, dominion over all. Nothing was not conquered, was not owned, claimed. It's a strange business, but you see, everything has come from the Trinity. And hell, according to the mystics, came into being at the point when another word, in a sense, was pronounced, but in reverse. It's what happened in the first cycle of creation, which is the angelic one, when they too had a test. And it would seem, that they were shown beforehand what we're celebrating today, the incarnation. And this famous word, non serviam, I will not serve. In other words, it was something inferior to them, and they wouldn't go along with it. And this owning then of their glory, Lucifer was the brightest of all. Hence, the hatred he has for the brightest of all creatures that we're celebrating today, our Blessed Lady. He hates our Blessed Lady with a perfect, perfect hate, envy. A creature has taken his place. Lucifer means light bringer, Lucifer. So we have that point there of rebellion, the first cosmic jarring note, when this pride comes in, and what happens? This war in heaven of which the Apocalypse speaks, when Michael replies with that humility of an archangel, who is like God? It was a reversal of Satan's thing. I have this, who is like God? Michael, who is like God? His name, as though it were his name. And then, of course, this ousting, and it would seem from the mystics that there was a huge battle and Satan was trying to get them all. A massive, massive rebellion of all the angels at that point, and he was sort of succeeding. A large number fell, and greater power was given to Michael. So we have only a third which are lost, but that's a large number. A very large number, and they're around with that perfect hatred for us. We're going to get what they haven't got. That hatred is there. But again, it was this will, on that level, angelic, which was refused. But that, in some way, at that moment in time when the Lord said, consummatum est, tetelestai in Greek, it is accomplished, it is fulfilled, it is consummated. He was able then to own what he had conquered. I have conquered the world. Therefore, it makes sense that he would, in some way, go right down to all that was. And of course, when it came to not going down to the bottom level, but to the place, Hades, Sheol, where the just were waiting, that he would then present his trophies, these glorious, brilliant wounds, which have opened again the doors of heaven. Now, that was something which sent a tremor of joy throughout the underworld. At last, we can breathe again. No one, not even Moses, could enter heaven without the redemption. And of course, it was the great battle which the theologians had throughout the Middle Ages. What about Our Lady? Because remember, the Immaculate Conception, they would not accept it, a lot of them. Even Thomas Aquinas was very hesitant about it. It was a problem because she is human, therefore in need of redemption. And of course, it was the Holy Spirit, bit by bit, which gave to understand that in God time is not, and therefore it could be applied before this anticipation, and therefore the merits, but she's in there. But in her case, therefore, the consequences also are in there, and her body would not suffer the consequences, because rotting, corruption, is the consequence of original sin, which therefore she had not. But with the others, there's no question whatsoever of their getting into glory until the gates are opened. At that moment there, consummatum est. when the veil of the temple is torn in two from top to bottom, and the old regime falls. And actually, Anne Catherine Emmerich has an interesting vision of what happens at that point. She sees darkness coming into the old regime, into the temple. They carry on the celebrations of Passover and so on, and it's all going wrong. And it's bizarre. There's something wrong. Of course, it's all over. The old regime is over. Now, all that is because of this word, this fiat that we are thinking about today. And it's exactly the same with us. Just the other day, I had in the Hermitage a friend who comes quite often at 7 in the morning, who was sharing one or two things with me. And he has a brother, a priest, and he was saying how in prison this condemned man was a gangster, one of the worst, was in there, and there was a wave of suicide in the prison. And it's strange, because when they start, they don't stop. But he'd been warned by another prisoner who had faith, obviously. It must have been, he was from the IRA, but he had some kind of faith not to do it, should it come to him, because he knew that was a tendency in the top security prison where he was, that they gave up hope and tried to finish it quickly. And he was being tempted, and he knew he was being tempted, because it was actually hearing a voice. Old Nick can actually make himself heard. And he was indicating how blissful it would be to shorten the sentence, to bring it all to a happy end, and so on. And he was also able, Satan, to in some way inject into the air a cushion of warmth and invitation. It was more than just a sound, but it was a whole feeling, yes, yes, as though irresistible. But your man remembered the word of the IRA person in prison and held his horses. And he was given a grace because he'd said no, at that point anyway. And the Lord was able to get through to him in prison on his own, and the Lord reversed that feeling of come this way to come my way. And he was able to receive in a flash a fullness of infused knowledge of the faith. So much so that my friend who comes to me in the morning at 7, his brother is a priest, a Franciscan, overheard him sometime later, or when all this is over, when he was actually out of prison, talking to somebody else. He didn't know this man at all. And he heard him, and this other chap to whom he was talking asked some question, and it was a complicated question. And the priest was flabbergasted. This chap couldn't have got that from himself. It was a theologically perfect, accurate answer to a complicated question. So he said to himself, I'm going to have a chat with that man where he's got this knowledge from. So we went to see him later on, got the whole story from him. He got it from the Lord in prison. He'd understood everything just like that. And when he came out eventually, he didn't get involved with the gang that was waiting for him, his own gang, waiting for him at the prison door. He walked in another direction altogether. He went to find good practicing Catholics. He was invited to get involved with Legion of Mary. And he went eventually to do what they were doing, but on his own actually, in O'Connell Street, to give out little pamphlets, little tracts, and eventually to talk to anyone who wanted to. And he would talk to people that he knew in the underground world of gangsters when he saw them coming along, and greet them not with, it's a nice day today, but we're going to hell. And start off from that point. And one big one came along, and this big one, strangely enough, didn't poke fun at him at all. You know what he answered? I know. It's like that. Not much I can do about it. I was going to walk on, but he knew. And you know that Keith Richards, one of the Rolling Stones, has said something similar, not that long ago. It's been in print. He was interviewed, and he said this: I hope I don't die too soon, because I know where I'm going. Because you see, by now, it wasn't like that when I was young, but by now they seem to be overtly, it would seem, into strange things. Because one day, I've seen actually on video, Keith Jagger unpeeled himself and he was covered in tattoos of strange sort. So, if they're succeeding, I wonder why. Anyway, close that parenthesis. But you see, they know. And a lot of these people know. Oh yeah, it exists all right. We believe in him. So they won't necessarily poke fun at you. Young people, sometimes, they've had encounters, you know. Anyway, that's another story. He, therefore, didn't let this fish go so quickly. He wouldn't let him just walk on. Because he's one of them, he was able to get through to their mentality. And eventually, he got through to him, and one word, just wanted one word. Yes. Because the permission he wanted was, can I phone somebody on my mobile? Right. Why not? And who was it? But a priest he knew in Bachelor's Walk down the road. So he got them together. I absolve you. All because of one word on the level of the will. Not much later, he heard on the grapevine that there was going to be a run-in. Because these gangs have it in for each other if they get into mischief. And there was one going to be, and he knew it. And he was offended as I had been. So he found his way to where he was and warned him, get out of it before they do you in. Go to England or somewhere. Couldn't be bothered. Who cares? What did he do? Tried to get through to him too, but again, one word had to be given. Nothing you can do without the will. You can't force grace or faith. Just one word has to come. It can and will change all eternity. So, can I go ring to my friend? Not much to lose, is there? Got his mobile phone, phoned his priest in Bachelor's Walk, and got them together. A fortnight later, he's gone down, washed in the blood of Christ. All because of one word. So, if, my friends, you're over a cup of coffee, handling somebody who's into big-time trouble and sort of knows it, don't be afraid to listen to the nudgings of the Holy Spirit. Ask for the right word, the right time. It could be the one that will change all